All right, so welcome to Module 1 for cerec. We are going to walk through this just as if I would walk through the computer for the very first time, so it'll be a little bit of a refresher if you have taken the introductory seminar, and it'll be a great reference tool for you in the future. So when you come up on the screen here, right dad smack in the middle, it says cerec. So we're going to double click on that as if we would any other program that is Windows based. Takes a couple seconds for it to launch into the program. And we'll break this up into small pieces so you can watch it a chunk at a time and review it a chunk at a time based on where you feel like you may need a little review or not. So here's the main screen for cerec. It's pretty self-explanatory, but you can, I'm going to circle down here lower left of the screen. You can search any patient you have in a database by typing in their name. You can highlight, click this, show any patient that you have, or you can come over here and you can add a new patient. All pretty straightforward stuff to do. Also on this home screen, which will become more evident to you later on as we get into how the technology works. If you come up to the top left, single click, you'll bring up the rest of the menu. And again, in any Windows program, it highlights programs that you have access to, and everything that you see that is shadowed is turned off, so you can't mess anything up, which is great for guys like me. So highlighted on this page is import case. You can do that if you happen to have an older cerec and you need to bring it into your new cerec, you can do that. If you happen to be on another machine in someone else's office, you can import things. You can also do, work from a laptop and bring cases in and out. Licensing, obviously not a big concern for us now. Configuration, window mode, how the screen looks. Basically about cerec is your help desk, and if you want to get out, you can get out. Most important thing on this screen for you guys and for any dentist actually is configuration. So I'm going to click on that. And what configuration brings me to is a menu that allows me to look at all parts of cerec. So parameters deals with the software itself. Devices deals with the hardware, deals with the acquisition unit, which is the computer part that's rolled in and out of your treatment room, or if you're a laboratory, it's a scanner. It also deals with whatever milling machine you have, and there are two types of milling machines that you can presently use in your office. One is called a compact unit, and the other one is the MCXL. MCXL is a little more robust. It will mill your restorations more quickly, a little more quietly, but both units are pretty nice. Kind of like buying a entry-level car versus the Mac Daddy car, the MCXL being the Mac Daddy. And then options, again, like any other computer program, you can set up options for your cerec to your specifications. Most important part of this, parameters. We're going to run through those really quickly, and then we'll hit them again in more detail later on. So we'll click on that. Cool part of parameters with this version, the latest version of cerec software, is that you can set your parameters for a crown, full crown, for an inlay-onlay, a partial crown, or for a veneer. That's important because, as you know, a crown being like the thickest, most aggressive style restoration we do compared to a partial coverage inlay-onlay compared to the very conservative veneer, you may want to tell cerec to design those restorations differently because the porcelain, the ceramic, is thinner or thicker depending on which one you're building. So we're going to pick crown here just as an example. And before I forget, this is important. As a definition, cerec looks at any restoration where all the cusps are taken away. So the entire occlusal table is covered. That is, by definition in cerec, a crown. It doesn't make any difference how far down the tooth gingivally you prepare. It just means all cusps have been removed, so the entire occlusal table is covered. If you have one or more cusps remaining, again, no reference to how far you prepare the tooth gingivally, by definition, cerec calls that an inlay or an onlay. And a veneer is a veneer, just like you've been taught in school. So as we do restorations, again, we'll talk more about it, we'll repeat it so it becomes familiar to you. But how you set up a tooth is based on very conservative veneer. If you have one or more natural tooth cusps remaining, you're going to build it in inlay-onlay. And if you're going to be shaping all the cusps away, you're going to build it in crown. And the cool thing about cerec is if for some reason mid-treatment you change your mind, you see something differently when you're preparing the tooth, you can go back and change these. So you're never stuck in a corner, which is really cool. So let's click on crown and see what we have to look at. Again, very briefly, because we'll hit this in more detail later on. Each one of these is described verbally and also by picture, which is really cool. It makes it really straightforward. So spacer, being the first category that's highlighted right now, is just like spacer when you're working with crown and bridge and you're working with a physical die. When you send that to a lab, and maybe you guys do this in pre-clinic, you paint a very thin layer of a liquid solution on the die, and that creates space for the cement layer or the bonding resin layer, depending on how you'll be luting your restoration. So you have the opportunity in cerec, it's on 80 right now, but you can dial that down so there's virtually no spacer if you like, or you can dial it up so there's a tremendous amount of room for the spacer. Now theoretically, the reason we come around 80 is most luting agents are between 40 and 80 microns thick. So it makes sense to have your spacer match the thickness of whatever your luting agent is going to be. If we look at the next category, occlusal milling offset, what you have is, this is an interesting parameter and actually one to pay a little attention to. What this means is what you see on the screen when cerec designs your final tooth for you. As a safety precaution, it allows you to make that picture the exact restoration that you've designed, or you can add porcelain to it, which you can see is adding this turquoise blue, or you can subtract it, which you can see leaves you a shadow. Now what that means is the picture you see on the screen, if you set this at 0, is exactly how it comes out of the milling machine. So what you see is what you get. If you are somebody who's a little anxious and think, well, maybe what I see is what I get is always going to be a little low, it's not going to be an occlusion, then you may be someone who decides to add a little ceramic to that so you have this blue line. What that means is your bite will be a little bit higher in real life than you've designed it on the screen. But if you're somebody who likes to polish and you're a little concerned in the beginning of using cerec that your bite isn't going to be appropriate, you can do that. If you're somebody who's concerned that your bite's always going to be high, you can make this a negative number. So what you get out of the milling machine is a little bit lower than what you've designed. I like it at 0. I'm a what you see is what you get guy. And if I find as a new user that all my restorations are coming out high or they're all coming out low, then I'd like to figure out why that's happening. So for me, 0 is the right number and the number I would recommend you guys start with. Proximal contact's pretty self-explanatory. How broad, how strong do you like your proximal contact? What you'll notice in cerec is everything is indicated by a color scheme, so you can recognize how big and bold the contact is or how small and pinpointed it is. And again, from computer to computer, this might be a little bit different. On my cerec machine, 25 microns is a really great number. I take that out of the milling machine, I try it in my patient's mouth, and I snap floss, and it's perfect. But if you like a big, bold, thick contact, you might want to dial this up. If you like a small pinpoint contact, you may want to dial it down. So everybody's going to have a little bit different preference. I like to keep mine right around 25. That tends to work really well and helps my contacts to be built pretty much like my patient's contacts exist in their mouth. But I can vary it if they have a stronger, thicker contact in general, or if they have lighter contacts as well. So pretty cool. Makes life easy. Occlusal contact strength, similar parameter, different location. So if 25 controls how well the floss comes through, on the occlusal contact strength, 25 works real well too to let me know that my bite is appropriate when I've built this tooth and it's going to match the occlusion of the adjacent teeth or the preoperative tooth depending on how I decide to build it. Again, you can vary this number so it's a little bit stronger if you're somebody who likes to have strong contacts or maybe you want to polish them back. Or you can dial this down to a negative number if you're somebody who says, hey, I just don't ever want to touch a restoration, so it's going to be a little light, but I'm okay with that. Sometimes people who put a thicker glaze when they're staining and glazing will make this a negative number to try and account for the thickness of the glaze. What I found is after doing staining and glazing for a few thousand restorations now, I have learned how to put a really nice even thickness of glaze on, and it really doesn't add a lot of glass to my restoration, so we're in pretty good shape at 25. Minimal thickness, both of these, whether it's radial, so what's going around the sides of the tooth, the buccal, the lingual, the mesial, and distal, or minimal thickness occlusal, is basically you telling cerec never to make a restoration thinner than whatever number you choose. Now there's an advantage, even though we know most all ceramic materials should be built at minimum 1.5 to 2 millimeters thick, there are reasons why you want to have this setting a little bit less than that. And we'll get into that later as you get into the software more and more, and it'll make more sense. Last but not least, margin thickness. You can control how much porcelain, if you look at this right here, if I move this number up, you'll watch that porcelain hang off the side of the tooth. So now I would have an over-contoured restoration. Or I can make it so it's down to 0. Again, we usually keep ours around 30, 40, 50. Reason being, it comes out of the milling machine. I am going to do some polishing, and I know that I'm probably going to take away 50 microns when I do that. So that's the home screen. That's parameters. To get out, you just hit exit. And we'll see you next time.